All right, so this time we're dealing with something a little different, a little darker than usual. We're used to digging into all sorts of things, but this deep dive, this one takes us right into the heart of the music industry. And a federal indictment that, well, it really shook up Hollywood.
Yeah.
We're talking about Sean Combs, Puff Daddy, P. Diddy, just Diddy, Love. I mean, the guy's had more names than, well.
Right.
And I know you're probably thinking, oh, great, another celebrity scandal, right? But this is way more serious than like a DUI or some crazy Twitter rant.
Oh, yeah.
We're talking racketeering, sex trafficking, forced labor. I mean, these accusations, they paint a picture that's, well, it's pretty different from all that glitz and glamour we usually associate with Diddy.
Yeah, that's right. And what's even more disturbing, I think, is the sheer scale of it all. This isn't just, a couple of isolated incidents. This indictment, it alleges this pattern of criminal behavior, like a deliberate, like a system designed to exploit and control.
Okay, so let's unpack this a little bit. Let's start with this term racketeering. I mean, that sounds like, I don't know, something straight out of a mob movie. So what does it actually mean, especially in this particular context?
Well, essentially, when we talk about racketeering, it really boils down to using an organization, any organization, but in this case, we're talking about a business, allegedly a criminal one, to commit crimes repeatedly for profit. It's all about creating a structure, a system to, engage in these illegal activities.
So it's not just like Diddy allegedly committing crimes just on his own. It's more like he's the alleged, the mastermind behind this whole operation.
Exactly.
Wow, that changes things.
Yeah, and that's where it gets really interesting because the indictment, it describes this whole operation, this alleged criminal enterprise. They even give it this chilling name, the Combs Enterprise.
The Combs Enterprise. Man, that sounds ominous, doesn't it? It sounds more like, I don't know, some ruthless corporation than a music empire. So what kind of picture does the indictment paint about how this alleged enterprise actually worked?
Well, if you believe what the indictment says, this wasn't just Diddy acting alone. They're alleging that he surrounded himself with this network, these individuals that helped him facilitate all of these alleged crimes. And the methods they were allegedly using, that's what's really, it's shocking.
Yeah, I mean, the indictment does describe some really graphic details about what allegedly went on. But before we get into the really specific details, I think it's important for everyone to kind of understand the bigger picture here. I mean, we're talking about power and control, right?
Absolutely. And that's where Diddy's celebrity, all that fame, it becomes like a really crucial part of this story. Because the indictment, it suggests that he used everything, his fame, his wealth, his connections, all those things that come with being a big name in the music industry, to create this environment where people, they felt pressured into complying with, whatever you wanted.
I know it's easy to sit here and think, well, why didn't they just walk away? But imagine you're a young artist, maybe even starstruck, and you've got this powerful figure, someone like Diddy, dangling your dreams in front of you. I mean, come on, that's got to be incredibly difficult to resist, right?
You're right. And it wasn't just the allure of fame and fortune. It's also that very real fear of what might happen if they didn't go along with it, the fear of retaliation. And the indictment, it alleges that Combs used intimidation, threats, even violence, to silence anyone who might try to expose him.
Okay, so we've got this foundation of power and control, but how did this so-called Combs enterprise, how did it actually operate? I mean, what were the schemes, the activities they're being accused of?
Well, this is where the indictment gets very specific, and it outlines this pattern of alleged manipulation and abuse, especially towards women. And at the center of it all were these, and this is a very disturbing term, these events the indictment calls freak-offs.
Freak-offs. Okay, yeah, now we're getting into some really unsettling territory. Let's unpack that a little. What were these and how do they play into these allegations of sex trafficking and forced labor? So we're talking about freak-offs. What exactly were these things and how do they tie into these allegations of sex trafficking and forced labor?
Yeah, so the indictment, it describes these freak-offs as, they were elaborate, orchestrated sexual encounters, often with multiple commercial sex workers, and they were allegedly arranged and directed by Combs himself.
And this is where the indictment really starts to paint this really dark picture of manipulation and coercion, because it claims that Combs would use all sorts of tactics to pressure women into participating in these freak-offs, like promising them career advancement, dangling that golden ticket to the music industry in front of them.
Right. And it wasn't just about empty promises. The indictment also alleges that Combs had financial control over some of these women, using money as a way to, exert influence, make them feel indebted to him.
Yeah, and if those tactics didn't work, the indictment suggests that things could get much, much darker. There are allegations of drug use, threats of violence, even physical abuse.
That's right. The indictment goes into detail about these instances where Combs allegedly used physical violence, and not just towards the women involved in these freak-offs, but also towards employees, people who witnessed this alleged abuse, basically anyone he perceived as a threat.
It's chilling. Just the thought of someone with that much power using fear and intimidation to keep people quiet, it's. But the indictment doesn't stop there. It goes on to describe this pattern of alleged obstruction of justice, like attempts to cover up these alleged crimes, silence anyone who might speak out.
Exactly. This goes way beyond just a few isolated incidents. We're talking about a systematic effort to control the narrative,
Yeah.
to protect the Combs enterprise, no matter the cost.
And it's that alleged effort to obstruct justice where things get even more complicated. The indictment, it details these instances of alleged witness tampering, bribery, even threats against people who might cooperate with authorities.
It's a classic case of someone allegedly using their wealth and their power to, well, to undermine the entire legal system. The indictment even claims that Combs recorded some of these conversations, maybe to intimidate or control the people involved.
Man, it's disturbing. You start to see how this whole web of control, built on this allure of fame, this fear of retaliation, how it could just ensnare people, make them feel like they're trapped. But if these allegations are true, I mean, what kind of legal trouble is Combs actually facing? What are the potential consequences here?
Well, it's important to remember that at this point, these are just allegations, and Combs is presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. But having said that, the charges against him, they are incredibly serious.
Yeah, we're talking racketeering, sex trafficking, forced labor, obstruction of justice. I mean, these aren't just, a slap on the wrist. These are serious charges.
You're right. These charges carry very real potential consequences. We're talking significant prison time, massive fines, mandatory restitution to any victims.
Yeah, this is definitely not your typical celebrity scandal. This goes way beyond that. This is about allegations of really serious criminal activity.
Yeah.
This is about a potential abuse of power that could have really far-reaching consequences. But beyond just the legal stuff, I think this case raises some important questions about the music industry as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this case has really shown a light on some of the darker aspects of the entertainment world.
Yeah.
The power dynamics, the potential for exploitation, those things are very real.
So how does a story like this, something rooted in this glamorous world of music and celebrity, how does it connect to the bigger picture? What can people learn from this whole deep dive into the Combs enterprise?
I think, for one thing, it reminds us that things aren't always what they seem. Behind the success, behind all that fame and glamour, there can be a much darker reality.
And it forces us to confront some uncomfortable truths about power, about control, and the ways in which people can be manipulated, exploited, especially in these situations.
I think this case has sparked a conversation, a much-needed conversation about accountability, about transparency in the music industry as a whole, which is something that's been needed for a very long time.
Yeah. We've covered a lot of ground here today, but there's this one layer to the story that I think is especially disturbing. It's this idea that Combs allegedly took steps to silence anyone who might try to challenge his version of what happened. It's like, I don't know, something out of a movie, this calculated attempt to control the narrative to protect his image. So we're talking about these alleged attempts to silence witnesses and control what people were saying. What specific actions did the indictment actually point to?
According to the indictment, Combs and people working with him, they allegedly engaged in this pattern of intimidation, putting pressure on people to, keep quiet about what they knew.
What's really disturbing? It's the level of planning, like how coordinated it seems, at least according to this indictment. It wasn't just a matter of saying, hey, keep your mouth shut. It seems like there was a real strategy involved here.
Right. The indictment claims that Combs and those around him, they went to some pretty extreme length to fabricate stories,
Yeah.
Discredit anyone who might basically interfere with the legal process by any means necessary.
And get this, the indictment even mentions times when Combs allegedly, secretly recorded conversations, potentially to, I don't know, to use against those people later. It's
Yeah.
creepy, to say the least.
Yeah, and I think that element to the case is what really emphasizes how dangerous unchecked power can be. It shows how far some people are willing to go to protect themselves, protect their image, and, avoid any kind of accountability.
It's a reminder that what we see when it comes to celebrities, those scandals, it's often just the tip of the iceberg, right? I mean, behind that public image, that carefully constructed persona, well, things aren't always as they seem.
Absolutely.
Mm.
And this case, it makes us ask some serious questions about the role of the media, and the public. It's on us to look deeper, to not just accept the surface level stuff, and to hold powerful people accountable when they do wrong.
This whole Combs Enterprise situation, it's complicated to say the least, and we're only scratching the surface here. But stepping back for a second, what do you think are the biggest takeaways for our listeners? I mean, what's the impact of a case like this?
I think it's a powerful reminder that power is a double-edged sword. You know, it can be used for good, obviously, but it can also be abused really easily.
Yeah. And it shows us how important it is to speak truth to power, you know? We need to support the people who are brave enough to come forward, especially when it's hard.
Absolutely. I think we all have a responsibility to create a culture where abuse and exploitation, they're not okay, and it doesn't matter how rich or famous or powerful someone is.
This has been, well, it's been intense. This deep dive has really given us a lot to think about. You know, behind the headlines, all the glamour, there are these real human stories, and sometimes those stories are really, really disturbing.
That's true. And it's important to remember that as of right now, these are still just allegations. Combs is considered innocent until proven guilty. But whatever happens with this case, I think it started a conversation about power, about accountability, and about the responsibility we all have to make the world a safer, more just place.
You've given us a lot to consider. I have a feeling that this case, this whole thing, and all the questions it brings up, it's going to be with us for a while. So thanks for,
Yeah.
guiding us through this. This was complicated. It was definitely thought-provoking. So thanks for this deep dive.
Happy to do it.